You brought your secretary to a royal gala? Holland's voice exploded across the Four Seasons ballroom, dripping with disbelief and cruel amusement. The laughter that followed was immediate and vicious. Kane doubled over, wiping tears from his eyes. River's chuckle turned into a full-blown cackle. Your actual secretary? The office girl? More laughter rippled through their circle, spreading to nearby guests who caught fragments of their conversation. Wait until everyone finds out the billionaire brought the help as his date. But the laughter died the instant she stepped through those golden doors. Every conversation stopped. Every champagne glass froze halfway to lips. Every head turned in perfect, stunned silence as Michaela Dorsey glided into the ballroom like liquid starlight, her midnight blue gown flowing around her like a queen claiming her throne. Holland's mouth fell open. Kane's glass slipped from his nerveless fingers and shattered against the marble floor. And in that moment of absolute silence, the woman they had been mocking transformed from their cruel joke into the most breathtaking sight any of them had ever witnessed. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue.
The silence in the $30 million Beverly Hills mansion felt heavier than the crystal chandelier hanging above Aries' chamber's head. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his master suite, watching the sun disappear behind the Hollywood hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that should have been beautiful but only reminded him how alone he was to witness it. At 34, Aries had everything society said a man should want. The tech empire he'd built from nothing now employed 12,000 people across North America. His company, Quantum Dynamics, had revolutionized data security systems, making him worth $4.2 billion according to the latest Forbes estimate. The mansion sprawled across 8 acres of prime real estate, complete with an infinity pool, tennis court, and a garage housing his collection of rare sports cars. Yet standing there in his custom-tailored Navy suit, Aries felt like the poorest man in California. His phone buzzed with another dinner invitation from Holland Sampson, one of his wealthy friends from the country club. Another evening of expensive wine, mindless chatter about stock portfolios, and beautiful women who saw dollar signs when they looked at him. He let the call go to voicemail, the same way he'd done for the past 3 weeks. "What's the point?" he whispered to his reflection in the darkening window. His dark brown hair was perfectly styled, his strong jawline clean-shaven, his emerald green eyes sharp with intelligence that had made him millions. But intelligence couldn't buy him a single genuine conversation or a woman who loved him for more than his bank account. The house phone rang, echoing through the empty hallways. His housekeeper had gone home hours ago, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the persistent ache in his chest that money couldn't heal. 23 miles away in downtown Los Angeles, Michaela Dorsey squinted at her computer screen as the words blurred together. The fluorescent lights in the Quantum Dynamics building cast harsh shadows across her desk, making her beautiful dark skin appear tired under the artificial glow. She rubbed her brown eyes, fighting off the headache that had been building since lunch. "Just 2 more reports," she muttered, pulling her thick black hair into a messy bun with a rubber band she'd found in her desk drawer. The navy blazer she wore over her simple white blouse had a small coffee stain near the collar that she'd tried unsuccessfully to scrub out that morning. At 28, Michaela had worked as Aries' Chamber's executive assistant for 3 years, managing his calendar, handling his correspondence, and somehow keeping his chaotic schedule organized enough that he could run a billion-dollar company. She was good at her job. Better than good. She could anticipate his needs before he voiced them, solve problems before they became crises, and maintain perfect composure even when dealing with the most demanding clients. But sitting there at 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, with takeout containers from lunch still cluttering her desk and her sensible black flats making her feet ache, Michaela felt invisible. Her stomach growled, reminding her that the half-eaten salad from 4 hours ago wasn't exactly a proper dinner. She glanced at her phone, seeing 3 missed calls from her sister Kennedy and a text asking if she was still alive or if the billionaire had worked her to death. The truth was, Aries had left the office at 6 p.m., same as always. He never asked her to stay late. Never demanded overtime. But Michaela couldn't bring herself to leave when there was still work to be done, still ways she could make his life easier, still proof she could provide that she belonged in this gleaming tower of success. Growing up in Compton with a single mother who cleaned office buildings to pay the bills, Michaela had dreamed of working somewhere like this. She'd earned her business degree from UCLA on a full scholarship, graduated summa cum laude, and landed this job through sheer determination and 3 rounds of interviews that left her emotionally drained but victorious. Now, staring at her reflection in the black computer screen, she wondered if this was all there was. Endless days of managing someone else's extraordinary life while her own remained ordinary, predictable, and completely unremarkable. The elevator chimed, and Michaela's heart jumped. Nobody else should be in the building this late except security. She quickly minimized her social media tab, where she'd been scrolling through photos of her college friends at gallery openings and charity events, wearing designer dresses and confident smiles that seemed to come so naturally to them. Michaela! Aries's voice carried across the empty office space. Are you still here? She straightened her blazer and tried to look professional despite the fact that her lipstick had worn off hours ago and her hair was falling out of its makeshift bun. Yes, Mr. Chambers. Just finishing up the quarterly reports for the Parker account. He appeared in her doorway, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. Even after 3 years of working for him, Aries Chambers still had the ability to make her feel like a schoolgirl with a hopeless crush. He'd loosened his tie, and the top button of his white shirt was undone, making him look more approachable than his usual polished billionaire image. It's almost 9 o'clock, he said, genuine concern in his voice. You should have gone home hours ago. I wanted to get ahead on tomorrow's schedule, she replied, which was partially true. The whole truth was that going home to her small apartment in mid-city meant another evening of reality TV and frozen dinners. Another night of wondering if this was all her life would ever be. Aries stepped closer to her desk, and she caught the faint scent of his cologne, something expensive that probably cost more than her monthly salary. Michaela, you work harder than anyone in this company, including me. You deserve better than staying here until all hours. The kindness in his voice made her throat tight. When was the last time anyone had noticed how hard she worked? When had anyone cared about her well-being beyond how it affected their own convenience? Thank you, Mr. Chambers, she said quietly. I'll head home soon. He lingered in her doorway, and she sensed he wanted to say something else. His green eyes held a sadness that she recognized because she saw it in her own mirror every morning. Here was a man who had everything money could buy, and he looked just as lonely as she felt. Aries, he said suddenly. Call me Aries. After 3 years, I think we can drop the formalities when it's just us. Michaela felt heat rise in her cheeks. Okay, Aries. The way his name sounded in her voice seemed to surprise them both. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the space between her desk and the doorway. 2 people who spent 40 hours a week together but knew almost nothing about each other's real lives. I'll see you tomorrow, he said finally, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. Good night, she whispered, watching him walk back toward the elevator. As the doors closed behind him, Michaela slumped back in her chair and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring another day of managing his life while hers remained frozen in place. Another day of being so close to extraordinary and yet feeling completely ordinary. She gathered her things, turned off her computer, and headed for the elevator, unaware that tomorrow would bring an invitation that would change everything. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, typical for December in Los Angeles. Michaela sat at her desk by 7:30 a.m., a full hour before Aries usually arrived, nursing her second cup of coffee and trying to shake off the restless night she'd spent replaying their conversation. Something about the way he'd said her name, the gentleness in his voice when he'd told her to call him Aries, had kept her awake until nearly 2 a.m. She'd chosen her outfit more carefully than usual this morning. An emerald green blouse that brought out the warm undertones in her dark skin, paired with her best black slacks and the pearl earrings her mother had given her for graduation. Not that it mattered. Aries probably wouldn't even notice. and she felt foolish for hoping he might. The elevator chimed at exactly 8:30, and Aries stepped out carrying 2 coffee cups from the expensive cafe down the street. His charcoal gray suit was impeccable as always, but there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he'd slept as poorly as she had. "Good morning, Michaela," he said, setting one of the cups on her desk. "Vanilla latte with an extra shot. I remembered you mentioning it was your favorite." She stared at the cup, warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. In 3 years, he'd never brought her anything from outside the office. "Thank you. That's very thoughtful. I have something I need to discuss with you," he said, and the serious tone in his voice made her stomach clench. Was he going to fire her? Had she overstepped somehow by using his first name? "Of course. Should I come to your office?" "Actually, let's talk here. It's more comfortable." He pulled up a chair from the empty desk beside hers, sitting down so they were at eye level. This close, she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, could smell his cologne mixed with the scent of expensive coffee. "I received an invitation yesterday," he began, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a thick, cream-colored envelope with gold lettering. "To the Royal British Consulate Gala. It's this Saturday, December 15th, at the Four Seasons, Beverly Hills." Michaela nodded, unsure why he was telling her this. She'd probably need to arrange his transportation, maybe send flowers to whoever he was taking as his date. The thought of some gorgeous socialite on his arm made her stomach twist, but she kept her expression neutral. "The invitation is for 2 people, Aries continued, his fingers fidgeting with the heavy cardstock. "And I'd like you to come with me." The words hung in the air between them like something fragile that might shatter if either of them moved too quickly. Michaela was certain she'd misheard him. "I'm sorry, what?" "I want you to be my date to the gala." His voice was steady, but she could see the vulnerability in his eyes. "You work incredibly hard, Michaela. Harder than anyone I know. You deserve to experience something beautiful, something special. You deserve a night where someone takes care of you for a change." "Aries, She struggled to find words, her mind racing. "I can't go to something like that. Look at me." She gestured to herself, suddenly feeling incredibly small in her office clothes. "I don't belong at royal galas. I don't have the right clothes, the right manners, the right anything." "You're wrong." The firmness in his voice surprised her. "You have something much more valuable than the right clothes. You have kindness, intelligence, grace. You handle million-dollar clients with more poise than most people I know handle ordering coffee." "That's different," she protested, panic rising in her chest. "That's work. This is your world. Those people, they'll take one look at me and know I don't belong there." Aries leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "What if I told you I don't feel like I belong there either?" The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Michaela studied his face, seeing something she'd never noticed before. Beneath the confidence and success, Aries Chambers looked as lost as she felt. "You're a billionaire," she said softly. "You built an empire from nothing. How could you not belong anywhere you want to be?" "Money doesn't buy acceptance, Michaela. It buys tolerance. People smile at my face and count my zeros behind my back. I'm tired of being seen as a bank account with legs." He ran a hand through his dark hair, messing up the perfect styling. "When I'm with you, even just working, I feel like myself. Not the billionaire, not the CEO. Just Aries." The vulnerability in his voice made her chest ache. She wanted to say yes, wanted to experience one night of magic, one evening where she could pretend she belonged in his extraordinary world. But the practical voice in her head, the one that had kept her safe and unnoticed for 28 years, wouldn't be silenced. "I don't have anything to wear to an event like that," she said finally. "A royal gala means ball gowns and diamonds. I shop at Target and TJ Maxx." "That's easily solved." I'll arrange for a stylist, a dress, whatever you need. No. The word came out sharper than she intended. I won't be your charity case, Aries. I won't be the poor girl you dress up like a doll for one night. Pain flashed across his features. That's not what this is. God, Michaela, is that really what you think of me? She saw the hurt in his eyes and felt terrible for putting it there. I don't know what to think. This is all so sudden, so unexpected. Yesterday you were my boss, and today you're asking me to a royal gala. I'm confused. Join the club, he said with a rueful smile. I've been confused since the moment I realized I look forward to coming to work not because of deals or meetings, but because I get to see you. Because you're the only person in my life who talks to me like I'm human. Michaela's heart hammered against her ribs. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? Aries. I know this is complicated. I know there are 100 reasons why this is a bad idea. But I also know that I'm tired of pretending I don't notice how your eyes light up when you talk about the books you're reading. I'm tired of pretending I don't look forward to your terrible jokes about coffee. I'm tired of being lonely when the person who makes me feel less alone is sitting 20 feet away from me every day. The honesty in his words stripped away all her defenses. She could see the boy he must have been before the money and success, vulnerable and hoping someone would choose him for who he was rather than what he could provide. What if I embarrass you? She whispered. What if I use the wrong fork or say the wrong thing? What if your friends hate me? Then they're not really my friends, are they? He reached across the space between them and gently took her hand. His skin was warm, slightly calloused despite his wealth, real and solid and comforting. Michaela, I'm not asking you to be anyone other than exactly who you are. That's all I want. That's all I've ever wanted. She looked down at their joined hands, his pale fingers intertwined with her darker ones, and felt something shift inside her chest. Maybe she was tired of being invisible. Maybe she was tired of watching life happen to other people while she managed schedules and answered phones. If I say yes, she said slowly, and that's a big if, I need you to understand something. I can't promise I'll be the kind of date you're used to. I don't know how to work a room or make small talk with royalty. I might be a complete disaster. Promise me one thing, Aries said, squeezing her hand gently. Promise me you'll be yourself. That's all I'm asking for. Michaela closed her eyes, feeling like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to jump into something that would either destroy her or transform her completely. Okay, she whispered, opening her eyes to meet his. Yes, I'll go with you. The smile that spread across Aries's face was brighter than any she'd ever seen from him. Pure joy, unguarded and real. Really, really. But Aries. She squeezed his hand back. I meant what I said. I can't make any promises about how this will go. The only promise I need is that you'll be there, he said. Everything else, we'll figure out together. As they sat there holding hands in the empty office, with the December rain pattering against the windows and the city waking up below them, Michaela felt like she was stepping into a story she'd only ever read about in books. Saturday couldn't come fast enough, and yet she was terrified it would arrive too soon. Thursday morning found Michaela staring at her closet with the kind of desperation usually reserved for natural disasters. Every piece of clothing she owned seemed to mock her from their hangers. Business casual blazers, sensible slacks, weekend jeans that had seen better days. Nothing even remotely suitable for a royal gala. Her phone buzzed with a text from Aries. Personal stylist will meet you at Nordstrom Beverly Hills at 2 p.m. Her name is Aviana Carson. Don't worry about cost. Michaela's hands shook as she typed back. I told you I didn't want charity. His response came immediately. It's not charity. It's me wanting my date to feel confident. Please let me do this. She stared at the message for 10 minutes before finally typing. Okay. Thank you. The Nordstrom in Beverly Hills felt like stepping into another universe. Crystal chandeliers hung from soaring ceilings, and everything from the marble floors to the air itself seemed to whisper, expensive. Michaela clutched her Target purse tighter and tried not to feel like an imposter. Aviana Carson turned out to be a petite woman in her 40s with silver hair and kind eyes who didn't bat an eyelash when Michaela explained her situation. "Honey, I've dressed senators' wives and movie stars," Aviana said, leading her toward the formal wear section. "Trust me when I say confidence is the only accessory that really matters. Everything else is just fabric and thread." For the next 3 hours, Michaela tried on gowns that cost more than her monthly rent. Silk that flowed like water, beading that caught the light like trapped stars, fabric so luxurious they felt like wearing clouds. But every time she looked in the mirror, all she could see were her flaws. Her shoulders were too broad, her hips too wide, her skin too dark for the delicate pastels Aviana kept selecting. "I look ridiculous," Michaela said, standing in a pale pink gown that made her feel like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. "You look uncomfortable," Aviana corrected. "There's a difference. Let's try something else." The midnight blue gown changed everything. The moment Aviana zipped it up, Michaela felt her posture straighten. The deep sapphire color made her dark skin glow, and the elegant cut accentuated her curves instead of hiding them. The fabric felt like liquid silk against her skin, and for the first time all day, she didn't immediately want to rip it off. "Now that," Aviana said with satisfaction, "is your dress." Friday brought a different kind of torture. At Aries's insistence, Michaela found herself at an upscale salon in West Hollywood, where a team of stylists fussed over her hair and makeup like she was a bride preparing for her wedding day. "Your bone structure is absolutely stunning," gushed the makeup artist, a young man named Jagger who wielded mascara like a magic wand. "We're going to play up those gorgeous eyes and that perfect skin tone." Michaela tried to relax as they worked, but her mind kept spinning with worst-case scenarios. What if she tripped walking into the gala? What if she spilled something on her dress? What if Aries's friends took one look at her and made it clear she didn't belong? Her phone rang, and she saw her sister Kennedy's name on the screen. "Girl, you've been avoiding my calls for 3 days, Kennedy said without preamble. "What's going on?" "I'm getting my hair done," Michaela said, trying to sound casual. "Since when do you get your hair done on a Friday afternoon?" Wait. There was a pause. "This isn't about that boss of yours, is it? The billionaire." Michaela sighed. Kennedy had always been able to read her like an open book. "He asked me to a gala. It's tomorrow night." "A gala?" Kennedy's voice went up 3 octaves. "Michaela Dorsey, are you telling me you're going on a date with a billionaire and you didn't tell me?" "It's not a date," Michaela protested, though even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it. "He just thought I deserved a nice evening out." "Aha! And I'm the Queen of England. Maya, that man is clearly interested in you." "Don't call me Maya when I'm having a crisis," Michaela said, using their childhood argument. "And he's not interested. He's lonely, and I'm convenient." "Or," Kennedy said pointedly, "he's a man who finally noticed what everyone else has been seeing for years. That you're brilliant and beautiful and deserve someone who appreciates you." Michaela felt tears prick her eyes. "What if I make a fool of myself? What if I prove to everyone, including him, that I don't belong in his world? Then you come home, and we eat ice cream and watch terrible movies until you feel better," Kennedy said softly. "But Maya, what if you don't make a fool of yourself? What if you have the most amazing night of your life? What if you finally let yourself be happy?" Meanwhile, across town at the exclusive Hillcrest Country Club, Aries was having his own crisis of confidence. He sat at the bar nursing a scotch he didn't really want, listening to his friends Holland Sampson and Kane Atkinson argue about golf handicaps, and wondering what the hell he was doing. "You're unusually quiet tonight," observed River Kaur, sliding onto the bar stool beside him. River was old money, inherited wealth that came with a trust fund, and a sense of entitlement that occasionally made Aries's teeth ache. "Everything all right with the Empire?" "Everything's fine," Aries said, taking a sip of his drink and immediately regretting it. The expensive scotch tasted like liquid regret. "Speaking of fine," Holland said, turning away from his golf argument, "who are you bringing to the Royal Gala tomorrow night? Please tell me you finally asked out that actress you met at the charity auction. What was her name? Dulce, say something." Aries felt his stomach tighten. He'd been dreading this conversation all week. "Actually, I'm bringing someone else." "Oh." Kane raised an eyebrow. "New conquest. Do tell." "She's not a conquest," Aries said, his voice sharper than he'd intended. She works with me." The three men exchanged glances that made Aries want to punch something. "Works with you how?" River asked with a smirk. "Please don't tell me you're bringing some corporate shark in a power suit. The Royal Gala is supposed to be fun, not a networking opportunity." "She's my assistant," Aries said quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Holland burst into laughter. "Your assistant? Aries, please tell me you're joking. You're bringing your secretary to a royal gala." "Her name is Michaela," Aries said, his voice dangerously low. "And she's more intelligent and gracious than half the women who usually attend these events." "I'm sure she's very competent at filing and answering phones," Kane said with barely concealed amusement. "But a royal gala? Come on, man. Think about your reputation." "What about my reputation?" "You'll be the laughingstock of the evening," River said bluntly. "Bringing the help to a social event like that? People will think you've lost your mind or your money." Aries felt anger building in his chest, hot and protective. "Or maybe they'll think I finally figured out what actually matters." "And what's that?" Holland asked, still chuckling. "Spending time with someone who likes me for who I am, not what I can buy them." The three men fell silent, sensing they'd pushed too far. But the damage was done. Aries could see it in their eyes, the mixture of pity and amusement that made him feel sick. "Look, Aries," River said in what he probably thought was a kind tone, "we're just looking out for you. Bringing your assistant to a royal gala sends a message. Are you sure that's the message you want to send?" Aries finished his scotch and stood up. "The message I want to send is that I choose to spend my time with people who matter to me. If that's a problem for anyone, that says more about them than it does about me." He left them sitting at the bar, their laughter following him to the parking lot. By the time he reached his car, doubt had crept in like a poison. What if they were right? What if he was setting Michaela up for humiliation? What if he was being selfish, putting her in a situation where she'd be judged and found wanting by people who mattered in his social circle? Saturday arrived gray and cold, with a December wind that rattled the windows of Michaela's apartment. She'd barely slept, her mind racing between excitement and terror. The dress hung in her bedroom like a beautiful threat, midnight blue and perfect and completely outside her realm of experience. At 4 p.m., she began the careful process of getting ready. The makeup artist had given her detailed instructions, and she followed them like a recipe, layering foundation and concealer and eyeshadow with the precision of a scientist. Her hands shook as she applied the deep red lipstick that Jagger had sworn would be perfect with her skin tone. The dress slipped over her head like a dream, the silk cool against her skin. She'd practiced walking in the heels for an hour the night before, and they felt slightly less like instruments of torture now. But standing in front of her full-length mirror, Michaela felt like she was looking at a stranger. The woman in the reflection was elegant, poised, beautiful. She looked like she belonged at royal galas and charity auctions and all the places Michaela had only ever seen in magazines. Her phone buzzed with a text from Aries. "Car will be there at 6:30. You're going to be amazing." She typed back, "I hope you're right." But as she applied one final coat of lipstick and checked her appearance one last time, Michaela couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to walk into a world that would chew her up and spit her out. The real question was whether she was brave enough to find out. The Four Seasons Beverly Hills gleamed like a jewel against the darkening December sky. Valet attendants in crisp uniforms directed a parade of luxury vehicles toward the entrance, where photographers waited to capture the evening's most prominent guests. Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, and Maseratis formed an elegant procession, each one depositing beautifully dressed couples who moved with the effortless confidence that came with a lifetime of privilege. Aries adjusted his black bow tie for the third time as his driver navigated the circular driveway. The Royal British Consulate Gala was one of the most exclusive events of the Los Angeles social season, attended by Hollywood royalty, tech moguls, and old money families whose names adorned museum wings and university buildings. He'd attended for the past 5 years, each time feeling more disconnected from the glittering world around him. Tonight felt different. Tonight, he was bringing someone who mattered. The ballroom of the Four Seasons had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over cream and gold decorations, while arrangements of white roses and winter greenery created an atmosphere of elegant sophistication. Round tables draped in ivory silk surrounded a polished dance floor, and a string quartet played classical pieces from a small stage decorated with the Union Jack and the California state flag. Aries accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server and surveyed the crowd. The usual suspects were already in attendance: tech executives from Silicon Valley, entertainment industry powerhouses, politicians, and the kind of wealthy socialites who treated charity galas like competitive sport. Aries! Holland Sampson's voice boomed across the room. At 42, Holland had inherited his family's pharmaceutical fortune and spent his time collecting wives, sports cars, and gossip with equal enthusiasm. His current companion was a statuesque blonde who looked young enough to be his daughter and bored enough to be planning her escape. Holland, Aries replied, accepting the firm handshake that Holland used to establish dominance in every interaction. Fantastic turnout tonight, Holland continued, his pale blue eyes scanning the room like a predator assessing prey. I heard Prince William's cousin is here somewhere. And that tech billionaire from Austin flew in just for this. Kane Atkinson materialized beside them, drink already in hand despite the early hour. Kane came from Texas oil money and had never worked a day in his life, a fact he wore like a badge of honor. His perpetual tan spoke of too many hours on golf courses and yacht decks, and his smile held the particular cruelty that came with inherited superiority. Aries, my friend, Kane drawled, his voice carrying the slight accent he'd cultivated at boarding school. You're looking unusually nervous tonight. Everything all right? I'm fine, Aries said, though he could feel tension building between his shoulder blades. Where was Michaela? Her car should have arrived 20 minutes ago. River Core joined their circle, resplendent in a custom tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's cars. River's family had made their fortune in real estate and shipping, building an empire that spanned 3 generations. Unlike Holland and Kane, River possessed actual intelligence, which somehow made his casual cruelty more cutting. So, River said, sipping his champagne with the appreciation of someone who'd been drinking expensive wine since childhood, we're all dying to meet this mysterious date of yours. Where is she hiding? The 3 men formed a semicircle around Aries, their body language casual but their attention focused with the intensity of sharks scenting blood. These friendships, if they could be called that, had been forged in the fires of business deals and mutual advantage. They tolerated each other's company because their social circles overlapped, their business interests occasionally aligned, and their wives enjoyed organizing charity events together. She'll be here, Aries said, checking his watch. 7:35 p.m. The knot in his stomach tightened. Come on, don't keep us in suspense, Holland pressed, his grin growing wider. After all the speculation, we're practically dying to meet this woman who finally captured the heart of the elusive Aries Chambers. Is she someone we know? Kane added. Please tell me you finally asked out that venture capitalist we met at the Malibu thing last month. What was her name? Marie something. Or that actress from the charity auction, River suggested. The one with the foundation for underprivileged children. Very noble, very photogenic. Aries felt his phone buzz and quickly checked it. A text from his driver. Ms. Dorsey's car is running late due to traffic on Sunset. ETA 7:45 p.m. She's caught in traffic, Aries said, pocketing his phone. She'll be here soon. Traffic, Holland repeated with amusement. How refreshingly normal. Most of our usual crowd would have taken helicopters to avoid such pedestrian concerns. Who is she, Aries? River asked, his dark eyes studying Aries's face with uncomfortable intensity. The mystery is killing us. Aries took a sip of his champagne, buying time. He could lie, could make up some story about meeting her at a gallery opening or through mutual friends. But the thought of denying Michaela, of treating her like something to be ashamed of, made his stomach turn. She works at my company, he said finally. The three men exchanged glances, and Aries caught the flash of something predatory in their expressions. Works at your company, how? Kane pressed. Executive? Legal? Marketing? She's my assistant. The words hung in the air like a confession. For a moment, none of them moved. Then Holland began to laugh, a sound that started as a chuckle and built into something genuinely delighted. Your assistant? Holland repeated, wiping tears from his eyes. Aries, please tell me you're joking. You brought your secretary to a royal gala? Kane's voice rose with incredulous amusement. Your actual secretary? River didn't laugh. Instead, he studied Aries with the cold calculation of someone reassessing a business partner. This is the woman you've been so secretive about? Your office assistant. Her name is Michaela, Aries said, his voice hardening. And she's more intelligent and gracious than most people in this room. I'm sure she's very good at scheduling meetings and answering phones, Holland said, still chuckling. But Aries, this is a royal gala. There are photographers here, society reporters. What will people think? They'll think I chose to spend the evening with someone whose company I enjoy. They'll think you've lost your mind, Kane said bluntly. Or your money. When billionaires start bringing the help to social events, people assume there's been some kind of financial catastrophe. She's not the help, Aries snapped. She's a person. A remarkable person who deserves respect. Of course she does, River said smoothly. I'm sure she's lovely. But Aries, you have to think about appearances. Your reputation affects all of us. We move in the same circles, do business with the same people. When you make questionable social choices, it reflects on your judgment. Questionable social choices? Aries's voice was dangerously quiet. Bringing your secretary to a royal gala, Holland said, his laughter finally subsiding. Come on, man. You had to know how this would look. How what would look? A billionaire bringing his assistant to a high society event, Kane explained as if speaking to a child. It sends a message. Either you're having some kind of breakdown, or you're so desperate for companionship that you're fishing in the office pool. The casual cruelty in their voices made Aries's hands clench into fists. These men, who had never worked for anything in their lives, who had inherited their wealth and their positions and their sense of superiority, were talking about Michaela like she was some kind of curiosity, a mistake he'd made that reflected poorly on his judgment. Let me guess, River continued, swirling his champagne thoughtfully. She's probably young, probably pretty in that accessible way office girls are. You started staying late, she started bringing you coffee, and before you knew it, you'd convinced yourself it was romance instead of convenience. You don't know what you're talking about, Aries said, but even as the words left his mouth, he felt doubt creeping in. Was that what this was? Had he misread the situation entirely? We've all been there, Holland said with mock sympathy. There's something appealing about the grateful admiration of someone who's impressed by things we take for granted. But Aries, bringing her here, to this crowd, you're setting her up for humiliation. And yourself, Kane added. Every person in this room is going to be watching, waiting to see how this plays out. They're going to pick apart everything from her dress to her table manners to the way she holds her champagne glass. She'll be fine, Aries said, but his voice lacked conviction. Will she? River asked pointedly. Has she ever been to an event like this? Does she know which fork to use for the salad course? Can she make conversation with a duke's wife or a Supreme Court justice? Because those are the people she'll be sitting with tonight. The doubt that had been gnawing at Aries since yesterday grew stronger. What if his friends were right? What if he was being selfish, dragging Michaela into a world that would judge her harshly? What if his desire for genuine companionship was going to result in her public embarrassment? Look, Holland said, his tone becoming almost kind, we're not trying to be cruel. We're trying to protect you both. It's not too late to fix this. Tell her you're feeling ill. Send her home with a nice piece of jewelry and an apology. Find someone more appropriate to fill the empty seat. More appropriate? Aries's voice was ice. Someone who belongs here, Kane clarified. Someone who won't stick out like a sore thumb. Before Aries could respond, a murmur swept through the ballroom. Conversations paused, heads turned, and every eye in the room focused on the entrance. And then Aries saw her. Michaela stood in the doorway like something from a dream, and Aries felt his entire world shift on its axis. The midnight blue gown flowed around her like liquid silk, and the deep color made her dark skin glow with an inner radiance that took his breath away. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo that showcased the graceful line of her neck, and diamond earrings caught the light like captured stars. But it wasn't just her beauty that silenced the room. It was the way she carried herself, the quiet confidence in her posture, the serene expression that suggested she belonged exactly where she was. Holland's champagne glass slipped from his nerveless fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Holy! Kane breathed, the word trailing off into stunned silence. River stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, as every assumption he'd made about Michaela Dorsey crumbled into dust. And Aries, watching his friends' faces transform from smug superiority to slack-jawed amazement, felt a smile tug at the corners of his mouth. The woman they'd been mocking, the office girl they'd dismissed as beneath notice, had just walked into the room like a queen claiming her throne. Earlier that afternoon, at 3 p.m., Michaela stood in her small mid-city apartment bathroom, staring at her reflection and fighting the urge to call Aries and cancel everything. The woman looking back at her seemed ordinary, unremarkable, completely wrong for the extraordinary evening ahead. Her hands trembled as she opened the makeup kit that Jagger had carefully packed for her, each product labeled with detailed instructions written in his flowing handwriting. Foundation first, then concealer, then powder, she read aloud, her voice shaky in the quiet apartment. You can do this, Michaela. It's just makeup. It's just a dress. It's just one evening. But even as she said the words, she knew they were lies. This wasn't just anything. This was stepping into Aries's world, a world where she would be judged by people who had never struggled to pay rent or chosen between groceries and gas money. Her phone rang, and Kennedy's name flashed on the screen. How are you holding up? Her sister asked without preamble. I'm terrified, Michaela admitted, dabbing foundation under her eyes with the expensive beauty blender Jagger had given her. What if I make a fool of myself? What if everyone can tell I don't belong there? Then you'll survive it, Kennedy said firmly. Maya, do you remember when we were kids and Mama took us to that fancy department store in Century City? You were maybe 8, and you wanted to try on one of those pretty dresses in the children's section. Michaela smiled despite her nerves. The salesperson told us we were in the wrong section. And what did you do? I tried on the dress anyway. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever worn. That's right. And you looked like a princess in that dress, even though it cost more than Mama made in a month. The problem wasn't you, Maya. The problem was that woman who couldn't see past her own prejudices. Michaela's hand steadied as she applied concealer to the dark circles under her eyes. I just don't want to embarrass him. Honey, any man who would be embarrassed by you isn't worth your time. But I don't think Aries Chambers is that kind of man. From everything you've told me about him, he sees you, the real you, and he likes what he sees. 4:30 p.m. The makeup process took longer than expected. Every time Michaela thought she was finished, she found another flaw to correct, another imperfection to hide. The red lipstick went on and came off 3 times before she finally decided it looked right. Her neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez knocked on the door just as Michaela was finishing her eye makeup. "Mija," the elderly woman said, her eyes widening as she took in Michaela's transformation. "You look absolutely stunning." "You think so?" Michaela asked, turning back to the mirror. "I feel like I'm playing dress-up." "Let me tell you something," Mrs. Rodriguez said, settling into Michaela's small kitchen chair. "I worked for 30 years cleaning offices in Beverly Hills. You know what I learned? Rich people, they're just people. They put their pants on one leg at a time, same as us. The only difference is they never had to doubt they belonged somewhere." Mrs. Rodriguez stood and took Michaela's hands. "Tonight, you don't doubt either. You belong wherever you decide to be." 6 p.m., the dress seemed to whisper against Michaela's skin as she slipped it over her head. The midnight blue silk felt cool and expensive, sliding into place like it had been made specifically for her body. She'd practiced walking in the heels until her feet ached, but now they felt natural, adding height and confidence to her posture. Standing in front of her full-length mirror, Michaela barely recognized herself. The woman looking back was elegant, sophisticated, beautiful. The deep blue of the dress made her dark skin glow, and the diamond earrings Aviana had insisted were perfect caught the light like tiny stars. But more than the physical transformation, something had shifted inside her. Maybe it was Mrs. Rodriguez's words, or Kennedy's confidence, or simply the fact that she'd made it this far without backing down. For the first time in hours, Michaela felt like she might actually survive this evening. Her phone buzzed with a text from Aries. "Car will be there at 6:30. You're going to be amazing." She typed back, "I hope you're right." But as she applied one final coat of the deep red lipstick, Michaela realized she was hoping for more than just survival. She was hoping for magic. The black Mercedes that arrived to pick up Michaela was the kind of vehicle she'd only seen in movies. The interior smelled like expensive leather and subtle cologne, and the driver, a kind-faced man named Raymond, treated her with the same respect she imagined he showed all of Aries's guests. "First time at the Four Seasons?" Raymond asked as they navigated the early evening traffic on Wilshire Boulevard. "First time at anything like this," Michaela admitted, watching the city pass by through tinted windows. "Mr. Chambers is a good man," Raymond said quietly. "In 5 years of driving for him, I've never seen him as happy as he's been this week. Whatever you're doing, it's working." Michaela felt warmth spread through her chest. "He seems lonely sometimes." "Money can't buy the things that really matter," Raymond observed. "Connection, understanding, someone who sees you for who you really are. Mr. Chambers has everything except what he wants most." As they turned onto North Doheny Drive, Michaela could see the Four Seasons rising ahead of them, its lights twinkling against the December evening. Her stomach clenched with nervousness, but underneath the fear was something else. Excitement. Anticipation. The feeling that she was about to step into a story she'd only ever imagined. "You ready for this?" Raymond asked, pulling into the hotel's circular driveway. Michaela took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. "As ready as I'll ever be." The moment Michaela stepped out of the Mercedes, she felt the weight of 100 gazes. Photographers' cameras flashed, capturing her emergence from the car, and she was grateful for the hours she'd spent practicing walking in heels. Each step felt deliberate, confident, as if she'd been attending galas her entire life. The valet who helped her from the car treated her with the same deference he'd shown the movie stars and socialites who had arrived before her. The doorman smiled warmly and wished her a pleasant evening. And as she walked through the hotel's opulent lobby toward the ballroom, Michaela felt something she'd never experienced before. The absolute certainty that she belonged exactly where she was. The ballroom doors stood open before her, revealing a scene from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over elegantly dressed guests, and the soft strains of classical music drifted through the air. For a moment, Michaela hesitated. This was her last chance to turn around, to go home to her safe, predictable life where no one expected anything extraordinary from her. Instead, she lifted her chin, squared her shoulders, and stepped into the light. The effect was immediate and electric. Conversations paused mid-sentence as heads turned in her direction. The string quartet seemed to play more softly, as if the music itself was holding its breath. And in the sudden quiet, Michaela felt the power of her own presence, the weight of her own worth. She scanned the room until she found Aries, standing with 3 men near the bar. Even from across the ballroom, she could see the stunned expressions on his companions' faces, the way their mouths had fallen open in surprise. But it was Aries's face that made her heart soar. The pure joy in his eyes, the pride in his smile, the way he seemed to stand a little straighter when he saw her. He looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world, and for the first time in her life, Michaela felt like maybe she was. She began walking toward him, each step measured and graceful. The sea of elegant guests seemed to part before her, and she caught fragments of whispered conversations. Who is she? Absolutely gorgeous. Never seen her before. Must be someone important. A server appeared at her elbow with a silver tray of champagne glasses. Michaela accepted one with a gracious smile, her movements fluid and natural despite the grandeur of her surroundings. "Good evening," she said to a distinguished older woman who was staring at her with undisguised curiosity. "What a beautiful venue." The woman, who Michaela would later learn was the wife of a federal judge, smiled warmly. "Indeed it is. I don't believe we've met. I'm Eileen McLean." "Michaela Dorsey," she replied, offering her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you." As she made her way across the ballroom, Michaela found herself falling into easy conversations with strangers who seemed genuinely interested in meeting her. Her years of handling difficult clients and managing complex situations had given her social skills she hadn't realized she possessed. By the time she reached Aries and his friends, she felt like she was floating. The nervous girl from the mid-city apartment had been replaced by a woman who belonged in this glittering world, who could hold her own among the wealthy and powerful. "Gentlemen," she said as she approached their group, her voice warm and confident. "I hope I haven't kept you waiting too long." Holland Sampson's champagne glass hit the floor with a crash that seemed to echo through the suddenly quiet space around them. Have you ever had a moment where you surprised yourself with your own confidence? Sometimes we're stronger than we know. The sound of Holland's champagne glass shattering against the marble floor seemed to break the spell that had fallen over the group. Aries stepped forward immediately, his face lighting up with a smile that transformed his entire appearance from polished businessman to genuinely happy man. "Michaela," he said, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips for the briefest, most respectful kiss. "You look absolutely breathtaking." The warmth in his voice, the genuine admiration in his green eyes, made Michaela's heart flutter. But it was the way he said her name, like it was something precious, that made her feel truly beautiful. "Thank you," she replied, her confidence growing with each passing moment. "This place is incredible. I feel like I've stepped into a movie." Holland, Kane, and River stood frozen, their earlier mockery replaced by stunned silence. Michaela turned to them with a gracious smile, extending her hand to the nearest one. "I'm Michaela Dorsey," she said to Holland, who was still staring at her like he'd seen a ghost. "You must be one of Aries's friends." Holland blinked several times before remembering his manners. "Holland Sampson," he managed, shaking her hand. It's a pleasure to meet you." "The pleasure is mine," Michaela replied warmly. "Aries has told me so much about you." She moved to Kane next, who had recovered enough of his composure to attempt his usual charming smile, though it came out looking rather strained. "Kane Atkinson, welcome to our little gathering." "Thank you. What a beautiful event. Have you attended many royal galas?" "A few," Kane said, clearly struggling to reconcile the elegant woman before him with their earlier assumptions. "Though none quite as memorable as this one promises to be." River stepped forward last, his calculating mind already working to reassess the situation. "River Core, I must say that's a stunning dress." "Thank you." The stylist said midnight blue would work well with the venue's color scheme. Michaela's response was perfectly natural, showing she understood the careful choreography of high society events without seeming to try too hard. Aries watched the exchange with growing pride. Not only was Michaela holding her own, she was doing it with a grace and warmth that made his friend's earlier cruelty seem even more petty and small-minded. "Shall we find our table?" Aries suggested, offering Michaela his arm. "I'd love to," she said, accepting his escort. As they walked away from his friends, she leaned closer to him. "They seem nice," she said quietly, though there was a hint of something in her voice that suggested she'd picked up on the tension. "They can be," Aries replied diplomatically, "though I'm beginning to realize they're not as good friends as I thought they were." Their table was near the front of the ballroom, with an excellent view of the small stage where various dignitaries would speak throughout the evening. Michaela found herself seated between Aries and a distinguished woman in her 60s who introduced herself as Judge Luca Marsh. "I don't believe I've seen you at one of these events before," Judge Marsh said kindly. "Are you new to Los Angeles?" "I've lived here for about 5 years," Michaela replied, accepting a dinner roll from the basket being passed around their table. "I work in tech, so I don't usually move in these circles." "Tech is fascinating," said the man across from them, who turned out to be a venture capitalist named Enoch Pittman. "What area do you specialize in?" Michaela could have mentioned that she was Aries's assistant, could have downplayed her role and knowledge. Instead, she found herself talking about the industry she'd learned so much about during her 3 years at Quantum Dynamics. "Data security primarily," she said, surprising herself with how confident she sounded. "The intersection of privacy protection and accessibility is really where the future lies. Companies need to protect user data without creating barriers that prevent people from accessing services they need." Enoch leaned forward with genuine interest. "That's exactly the challenge we're facing with several of our portfolio companies. The regulatory environment is getting more complex every quarter." "The EU regulations have been particularly challenging," Michaela agreed. "But I think they're pushing companies toward better practices overall. When privacy protection becomes a competitive advantage rather than just a compliance requirement, everyone wins." Aries listened to her speak with growing amazement. He'd always known Michaela was intelligent, but hearing her hold her own in a conversation with successful investors and legal professionals made him realize how much he'd underestimated her. She wasn't just managing his calendar and answering his phones. She'd been absorbing everything, learning, growing, becoming an expert in her own right. Judge Marsh nodded approvingly. "It's refreshing to hear someone in tech talk about ethics and user protection. Too many companies seem to view privacy as an obstacle to profit." "Privacy is a human right," Michaela said simply. "Technology should enhance people's lives, not exploit them." The conversation continued through the first course, a delicate winter squash soup that Michaela navigated with the same natural grace she'd shown all evening. She used the correct spoon, made appropriate conversation, and somehow managed to make everyone at their table feel more interesting just by listening to them with genuine attention. During a lull in the dinner conversation, Aries leaned closer to her. "You're amazing," he whispered. "I don't think I've ever seen Enoch so animated about a conversation that didn't involve profit margins." Michaela felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I just find it all fascinating. Working for you, I've learned so much about the industry. I never realized how much I'd absorbed until tonight." "You haven't just absorbed it," Aries said quietly. "You've understood it, analyzed it, made it your own. You should be running your own company, not managing my schedule." "Don't be ridiculous," Michaela protested, but there was something in his voice that made her heart race. The way he looked at her, like she was capable of anything, made her feel more powerful than any dress or diamond earrings ever could. The main course arrived, an elegant preparation of beef tenderloin that gave Michaela a moment to observe the room around them. She noticed the careful choreography of the servers, the way conversations ebbed and flowed at different tables, the subtle hierarchies that governed who spoke to whom and when. But more than that, She noticed how comfortable she felt. The nervous girl from this afternoon seemed like a distant memory. This woman, sitting at a table full of successful, powerful people and holding her own in their conversations, felt real in a way that surprised her. "Michaela," Judge Marsh said during dessert, "I hope you don't mind me asking, but how did you and Aries meet?" The table fell quiet, waiting for her answer. Michaela felt Aries tense beside her, probably wondering if she'd be embarrassed to admit their professional relationship. "We work together," Michaela said simply. "I've been with his company for 3 years now. He's an extraordinary boss and an even better person." The sincerity in her voice seemed to surprise their table mates. In a world where business relationships were often transactional and romantic relationships frequently strategic, the genuine affection between Aries and Michaela was refreshing. "It's rare to see a couple who genuinely like each other," observed Enoch's wife, an elegant woman named Dulce who had been quietly observing the interaction all evening. "We're not," Michaela began, then stopped, unsure how to categorize what they were. "We're figuring it out," Aries said gently, reaching over to take her hand. "But you're right. I do genuinely like her. More than like her." The admission hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable and completely unexpected. Michaela felt her breath catch as she looked into his eyes and saw something there that had nothing to do with business or convenience or any of the doubts that had been plaguing her all week. Before she could respond, the lights dimmed and a man in formal military dress stepped up to the microphone to introduce the evening's keynote speaker, a representative from the British consulate. But as the speech began, Michaela found herself barely listening to the words about international cooperation and cultural exchange. Instead, she was intensely aware of Aries's hand holding hers under the table, the warmth of his touch, the way his thumb traced gentle circles across her knuckles. When the speech ended and the string quartet resumed playing, Aries stood and offered her his hand. "Would you like to dance?" he asked. Michaela looked at the dance floor, where several couples were already moving to the gentle waltz. She'd taken a few dance lessons in college, but nothing that had prepared her for this. "I should probably warn you that I'm not exactly graceful," she said. "Neither am I," Aries admitted with a smile. "But I think we can figure it out together." As they moved onto the dance floor, Michaela felt like she was floating. Aries's hand was warm and steady at her waist, guiding her through the simple steps of the waltz. She could feel the eyes of the other guests on them, but for once, she didn't care what anyone else thought. "Thank you," she said softly as they swayed to the music. "For what?" "For seeing me. For believing I could do this. For making me feel like I belong here." Aries pulled her slightly closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne and feel the warmth radiating from his body. "You do belong here," he said quietly. "You belong anywhere you want to be. Tonight just proved what I've known for 3 years. What's that?" "That you're extraordinary. And I'm the luckiest man in this room because I get to be here with you." As the music swelled around them and the crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the ballroom floor, Michaela felt something she'd never experienced before. The absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Sometimes that's all it takes to transform our entire world. The waltz ended, and Aries and Michaela remained on the dance floor for a moment longer than necessary, neither wanting to break the spell that had settled over them. The gentle applause from the other guests seemed to come from very far away as they looked into each other's eyes, both recognizing that something fundamental had shifted between them. "Should we get some air?" Aries suggested, his voice slightly hoarse with emotion. "The terrace overlooks the city." Michaela nodded, still feeling breathless from the dance and the intensity of his gaze. They made their way through the ballroom, past tables of elegantly dressed guests who watched their progress with varying degrees of interest and speculation. The terrace was blissfully quiet compared to the ballroom, with only 2 other couples enjoying the December evening air. String lights twinkled overhead, and the view of Los Angeles spread out below them like a carpet of diamonds. Michaela wrapped her arms around herself as the cool air raised goosebumps on her exposed shoulders. Without hesitation, Aries shrugged out of his black dinner jacket and draped it around her shoulders. The gesture was so naturally protective, so genuinely caring, that Michaela felt tears prick her eyes. "Better?" he asked softly. "Much." She pulled his jacket closer, breathing in the faint scent of his cologne that clung to the fabric. "It's beautiful out here. I can see why you love this city." "I didn't always," Aries admitted, moving to stand beside her at the railing. For the longest time, it felt like a collection of beautiful strangers. All these amazing places and opportunities, but no one to share them with who really mattered. They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the city lights twinkle below them. Michaela felt more peaceful than she had in years, as if all the anxiety and self-doubt that usually plagued her had been temporarily suspended. "Aries," she began, then stopped, unsure how to voice what she was feeling. "What is it?" "I just want you to know that tonight has been the most incredible evening of my life. Not because of the gala or the dress or any of this." She gestured toward the elegant terrace. "Because of you. Because of how you made me feel like I could be anyone, do anything." He turned to face her fully, his green eyes serious in the soft light. "You can be anyone, do anything. That's not me making you feel that way. That's just who you are." Before Michaela could respond, the sound of harsh laughter drifted from inside the ballroom. Through the glass doors, she could see Holland, Kane, and River standing near the bar, their heads close together in conversation. Something about their body language made her stomach clench with unease. "Your friends seem to be having an intense discussion," she observed. Aries followed her gaze and frowned. "They're not really my friends. I'm starting to realize that more clearly tonight." "What do you mean?" Aries hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Before you arrived tonight, they said some things about you. About us. Things that made me question their character and my judgment in keeping their company." Michaela felt ice form in her stomach. "What kind of things?" "It doesn't matter. They were wrong about everything." "Aries, what did they say?" The pain in her voice made him turn to face her fully. "Michaela, please don't let their ignorance hurt you. They don't know you, don't know what kind of person you are. Tell me what they said." Her voice was quiet but firm. Aries closed his eyes briefly, clearly reluctant to repeat his friend's cruel words. "They questioned my judgment in bringing you here. They made assumptions about your background, your education, your worthiness to be at an event like this." Each word hit Michaela like a physical blow. The confidence she'd been building all evening began to crumble as the familiar voices of self-doubt returned with a vengeance. "They were right, weren't they?" she said quietly. "I don't belong here. I'm a secretary from Compton who's been playing dress-up for one night." "That's not true," Aries said fiercely. "You've proven tonight that you belong anywhere you choose to be. You've charmed everyone you've met, held your own in conversations with some of the most successful people in Los Angeles. You've been gracious, intelligent, beautiful." "But I'm still your assistant," Michaela interrupted. "I still live in a one-bedroom apartment and shop at Target and worry about paying my student loans. Your friends see that. Everyone here probably sees that." "I don't care what they see." "But I do." The admission came out as barely a whisper. "Aries, I care what they think because their opinion matters to you, and you matter to me." Before he could respond, the terrace doors opened and Holland stepped outside, followed by Kane and River. Their faces were flushed with alcohol and something that looked like malicious amusement. "There you are," Holland said, his voice slightly slurred. "We were wondering where the happy couple had disappeared to." Aries stepped protectively closer to Michaela. "Holland, maybe this isn't the best time." "Oh, I think it's the perfect time," Kane interjected, his cruel smile becoming more pronounced. "We've been having the most interesting conversation with some of the other guests. Seems everyone's quite curious about your mysterious date." "What are you talking about?" Aries's voice carried a warning that his friend seemed determined to ignore. "Well," River said with mock thoughtfulness, "Judge Marsh mentioned how impressed she was with Miss Dorsey's knowledge of tech industry regulations. Said it was unusual for someone so young to have such insight into corporate compliance issues." Michaela felt her stomach drop as she realized where this was heading. "So naturally," Holland continued, "we explained that of course she'd be knowledgeable about such things, given her position as your personal assistant. Imagine everyone surprised to learn that the beautiful, articulate woman they'd been so impressed with was actually, well, the help." The words hung in the air like poison. Michaela felt every ounce of confidence drain from her body as the full impact of their revelation hit her. Everyone she'd spoken with tonight, everyone who had treated her as an equal, now knew the truth about who she really was. "You had no right," Aries said, his voice dangerously low. "We had every right," Kane shot back. "You brought her here under false pretenses. People were treating her like she was someone important, someone worthy of their respect and attention. We simply corrected the misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding," Aries said through gritted teeth. "She is worthy of their respect. She's more worthy of it than any of you." River laughed, the sound cold and cutting. "Come on, Aries. She's your secretary. A very pretty secretary, I'll grant you, but still just an employee. Did you really think you could parade her around here like she was your equal and no one would notice?" "She is my equal," Aries said fiercely. "She's worth 10 of you." "Worth 10 of us?" Holland's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "Aries, we're your friends. We're looking out for you. This little fantasy you've been indulging is over now. Everyone knows the truth." Michaela felt like she was drowning. The elegant terrace, the twinkling lights, the romantic atmosphere she'd been basking in just moments before, now felt like a stage set for her public humiliation. She could imagine the conversations happening inside the ballroom, the whispered discussions about the billionaire who'd brought his assistant to a royal gala and tried to pass her off as someone important. "Michaela," Aries said, turning to her with desperate eyes, "don't listen to them. What they think doesn't matter." "But it does matter," she said, her voice breaking. "Don't you see? They're right. I was pretending to be someone I'm not. I let myself believe that I belonged here, that I could be part of your world, but I can't. I'll never be good enough for this life, for these people, for you." "That's not true," Aries said, reaching for her hands. "Michaela, please." "Yes, it is." Tears were flowing freely down her cheeks now, probably ruining the careful makeup job that had taken hours to perfect. "Your friends are awful, but they're not wrong. I'm nobody special. I'm just a woman who works for you, who was foolish enough to think that one beautiful dress could transform her into someone worthy of a fairy tale." She pulled his dinner jacket from her shoulders and handed it back to him, the gesture feeling like the end of something precious and fragile. "I should go," she said quietly. "I should have never come here in the first place." "Michaela, wait." Aries called after her as she moved toward the terrace doors. But she was already walking away, her midnight blue gown trailing behind her like the remnants of a dream that had turned into a nightmare. She could hear Holland's laughter following her as she made her way through the ballroom, past the tables of guests who now looked at her with curiosity tinged with pity. The fairy tale was over. Cinderella was going back to her real life, and this time there would be no glass slipper to prove the magic had been real. Sometimes our worst fears come true not because they're accurate, but because we allow other people's cruelty to define our worth. Michaela didn't remember calling for a ride or walking through the hotel lobby. The next thing she was fully aware of was sitting in the back of an Uber, watching the glittering lights of Beverly Hills fade into the ordinary streetlights of mid-city Los Angeles. Her midnight blue gown pooled around her like spilled ink, and the diamond earrings that had made her feel like a princess now felt heavy and foreign against her neck. The driver, a kind-faced man in his 50s, kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror with obvious concern. "You okay back there, miss?" he asked as they stopped at a red light on Wilshire Boulevard. "You need me to take you somewhere else?" Hospital, maybe. No, thank you, Michaela managed, her voice hoarse from crying. Home is fine. Bad date? He asked gently. Michaela almost laughed, but it came out as more of a sob. You could say that. Well, for what it's worth, whoever made you cry like that is an idiot. You look like a movie star back there. The kindness in his voice made fresh tears spill down her cheeks. A stranger in an Uber was showing her more genuine compassion than the wealthy elite who had spent the evening judging her worthiness to breathe their rarefied air. By the time they reached her small apartment building, Michaela had cried herself into a state of numb exhaustion. She tipped the driver generously with the emergency cash she kept in her small evening purse and stumbled up the 2 flights of stairs to her front door. Her apartment felt impossibly small after the grandeur of the Four Seasons. The cramped living room with its second-hand furniture and peeling paint seemed to mock her for ever thinking she could belong anywhere else. She kicked off the expensive heels, which immediately made her 3 inches shorter and somehow smaller in every way that mattered. The midnight blue gown that had made her feel like a goddess now felt like a costume she'd been caught wearing. She unzipped it carefully, hanging it in her closet next to her work clothes like evidence of a crime she'd committed against herself. In her bathroom, she stared at her reflection while removing the carefully applied makeup. Each swipe of the makeup remover revealed more of her ordinary face underneath. Without the dramatic eye makeup and red lipstick, she looked exactly like what she was. A tired 28-year-old woman who cleaned offices buildings worth of dreams and pretended they were her own. Her phone had been buzzing constantly since she'd left the gala. 7 missed calls from Aries, 12 text messages that she couldn't bring herself to read. She finally turned it off and tossed it onto her nightstand, not wanting to see his attempts to make her feel better about the disaster she'd brought upon herself. Meanwhile, across the city in Beverly Hills, Aries stood alone on the Four Seasons terrace, staring out at the lights of Los Angeles and feeling like the biggest fool who had ever lived. The evening that had started with such promise had turned into a nightmare, and the worst part was that it was partially his fault. He should have known his friends would react badly to Michaela. He should have prepared her for their cruelty, should have warned her that some people in his world viewed kindness as weakness and authenticity as a character flaw. Instead, he'd been so caught up in his own desire to share something beautiful with her that he'd walked her straight into an ambush. Holland, Kane, and River had disappeared back into the ballroom, probably congratulating themselves on their successful destruction of what they saw as his temporary lapse in judgment. The thought of their smug satisfaction made Aries's hands clench into fists. He pulled out his phone and tried calling Michaela again, but it went straight to voicemail. Her sweet voice asking him to leave a message made his chest ache with regret. "Michaela, it's me again," he said after the beep. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me right now, but I need you to know that what happened tonight wasn't your fault. You were perfect. You are perfect. Those men, they're not my friends, and I should have realized that a long time ago. Please call me back. Please let me fix this." He hung up and immediately wanted to call again, but he forced himself to put the phone away. Chasing after her tonight would only make things worse. She needed time to process what had happened, time to realize that the opinions of Holland and his cronies meant absolutely nothing. But as the hours ticked by and his calls continued going to voicemail, Aries began to understand the devastating truth. Michaela believed what they had said about her. The cruel words had found their target in her deepest insecurities, confirming every doubt she'd ever had about her own worth. By 2 a.m., he was sitting in his empty mansion, still wearing his formal tuxedo, staring at his phone and trying to figure out how to undo the damage that had been done. The silence around him felt oppressive, made worse by the memory of how alive he'd felt just hours earlier when Michaela was beside him. For 3 years, she'd been the bright spot in his days. Her warm smile when he arrived at the office, her gentle laughter at his terrible jokes, her quiet competence that made his chaotic life manageable. He'd told himself he was just being kind by inviting her to the gala, but the truth was more selfish. He'd wanted to see her in his world because he was falling in love with her and couldn't imagine a future that didn't include her in every part of his life. Now, thanks to his own poor judgment and the cruelty of people he'd mistakenly called friends, he might have lost her forever. 3 miles away, Michaela lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of the evening. The humiliation burned through her like acid, eating away at the confidence she'd spent years building. But underneath the shame was something even worse. The knowledge that for a few precious hours, she'd allowed herself to believe in something impossible. She believed that a man like Aries Chambers could genuinely care about a woman like her. She believed that her intelligence and kindness and hard work could somehow bridge the vast gap between their worlds. She believed that love could overcome the practical realities of class and wealth and social expectations. How naive could one person be? Her phone, even though turned off, seemed to mock her from the nightstand. She knew there would be messages from Aries, probably kind words meant to make her feel better about what had happened. But she couldn't bear to hear his voice right now, couldn't stand the thought of his pity or his attempts to convince her that tonight had been anything other than a complete disaster. At 2:15 a.m., Michaela finally fell into a restless sleep, her dreams filled with glittering ballrooms and cruel laughter and the memory of dancing in Aries's arms before everything fell apart. Sunday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching Michaela's mood perfectly. She called in sick to work, something she'd never done in 3 years of employment, and spent the day in her pajamas, alternating between crying and staring blankly at the television. Her sister Kennedy called 6 times before Michaela finally answered. "Maya, thank God." Kennedy's voice was thick with relief. "I've been worried sick. How was the gala? Why haven't you been answering your phone?" "It was a disaster," Michaela said simply. "What do you mean, a disaster? What happened?" So Michaela told her. Everything. The transformation, the confidence, the magical evening that had felt too good to be true. The cruel revelation on the terrace, the public humiliation, the shattering realization that she'd been fooling herself about where she belonged. "Those men are monsters," Kennedy said fiercely when the story was finished. "And Aries should have protected you from them." "It wasn't his fault," Michaela said quietly. "He tried to defend me. But they were right, Ken. I don't belong in that world. I was pretending to be something I'm not." "You were being yourself," Kennedy corrected. "An intelligent, beautiful, accomplished woman who deserves respect from anyone, regardless of their bank account. The problem isn't you, Maya. The problem is a system that teaches people to value money over character." "Maybe," Michaela said, but she didn't sound convinced. "I just feel so stupid. I actually thought he might. I thought we might." "Might what?" "Nothing. It doesn't matter now." "It does matter. Maya, do you have feelings for him?" The question hung in the air for a long moment before Michaela whispered, "Yes. I think I'm falling in love with him. And that makes this whole thing so much worse." Monday morning would bring decisions. Michaela would have to face Aries at work, would have to pretend that Saturday night had never happened, would have to go back to being his efficient, invisible assistant while her heart slowly broke into pieces. The fairy tale was over. Now came the hard part, living with the knowledge of what she'd lost and what she'd never really had in the first place. The biggest choice is whether to let other people's opinions define our reality. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp December sunlight that made Los Angeles feel like a city of infinite possibilities. But for Michaela, sitting in her car in the Quantum Dynamics parking garage at 7:45 a.m., it felt like the longest walk of shame in history was about to begin. She'd changed her outfit 3 times that morning, finally settling on her most conservative navy blazer and black slacks, as if proper business attire could somehow armor her against the awkwardness of facing Aries after Saturday night. Her makeup was minimal, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, every trace of Saturday night's glamour carefully erased. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt endless. When the doors finally opened, Michaela was relieved to see that Aries's office was dark. His usual 8:30 arrival time would give her an hour to compose herself, to figure out how to behave normally around the man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and beautiful, and then watched her fall apart completely. She settled at her desk and tried to lose herself in the familiar routine of checking emails and reviewing his schedule. But every few minutes, her eyes would drift to the empty office across from her desk, and she'd remember the way he'd looked at her on the dance floor, like she was the most precious thing in his world. At 9:15, she heard the elevator chime. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she forced herself to look busy, but the footsteps that approached her desk were wrong. Too light, too quick. Michaela Dorsey? A woman's voice, professional but warm. Michaela looked up to see an elegantly dressed woman in her 40s with kind brown eyes and graying hair pulled back in a sophisticated chignon. She was carrying a manila folder and wearing the sort of expensive suit that whispered rather than shouted about its cost. Yes. I'm Adelina Keith from Morrison, Keith and Associates. I'm an executive headhunter. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Michaela blinked in surprise. I'm sorry, I think there's been some mistake. I'm Mr. Chambers's assistant. I know exactly who you are, Adelina said with a smile. That's why I'm here. I was at the Royal British Consulate Gala on Saturday night. I heard you speak about data security and privacy protection. I was quite impressed. The mention of Saturday night made Michaela's stomach clench. Oh, I see. I represent several major tech companies who are looking for someone with your particular combination of technical knowledge and communication skills. There are 3 positions I'd like to discuss with you, all in the executive range, all offering significant advancement opportunities. Michaela stared at the woman, certain she was dreaming. Executive positions? But I'm just an assistant. You're a brilliant woman who's been underutilizing her talents, Adelina corrected gently. Sometimes it takes the right circumstances to reveal what someone is truly capable of. Saturday night was those circumstances for you. Before Michaela could respond, the elevator chimed again, and this time the footsteps were achingly familiar. Aries appeared in the doorway of the reception area, and the sight of him made Michaela's breath catch. He looked terrible. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, there were dark circles under his green eyes, and his expensive suit couldn't disguise the fact that he looked like he hadn't slept in days. When his gaze found hers, the relief and pain in his expression were almost too much to bear. Michaela, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Thank God you're here. I was so afraid. He noticed Adelina then, and his expression became wary. I'm sorry, I didn't realize Michaela had an appointment. Mr. Chambers, Adelina said, rising from her chair with professional courtesy. Adelina Keith, Morrison, Keith and Associates. I was just discussing some exciting opportunities with Ms. Dorsey. Opportunities. Aries's voice was carefully neutral, but Michaela could see the tension in his shoulders. Executive positions at several major firms. Ms. Dorsey made quite an impression Saturday night. Her insights into data security and corporate compliance were remarkable. Aries looked at Michaela, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Pride, she realized. Even in the midst of his own pain, he was proud of her success. Ms. Dorsey is remarkable, he said quietly. Any company would be lucky to have her. Adelina handed Michaela her business card. Think about what we discussed. The salary ranges I mentioned are serious offers. You have more value in this market than you realize. After Adelina left, the silence in the reception area was deafening. Aries stood in his office doorway, clearly wanting to say something but unsure how to begin. Executive positions, he finally asked. Michaela nodded, still stunned by the conversation. She said Saturday night showed her what I was capable of. That I've been underutilizing my talents. She's right. Aries's voice was soft but firm. You should take one of those positions. You deserve so much more than managing my calendar and answering my phones. The generosity in his words, the way he was encouraging her to leave even though it would hurt him, made tears prick her eyes. Aries. I need to tell you something, he said, stepping closer to her desk. About Saturday night. About what happened with Holland and the others. You don't need to explain anything, Michaela said quickly. I understand. They're your friends, and I embarrassed you by being there. They're not my friends, Aries said firmly. And you didn't embarrass me. You were perfect, Michaela. You were gracious and intelligent and beautiful, and you showed everyone in that room what real class looks like. But they were right, Michaela whispered. I don't belong in your world. You're wrong. Aries moved around her desk, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. You don't belong in their world. But you belong in mine. You've always belonged in mine. Aries, please don't make this harder than it has to be. I fired them, he said quietly. Michaela's eyes widened. What? Holland, Kane, and River. I terminated all business relationships with them this morning. I removed them from the board of my charitable foundation. I want nothing to do with people who could treat you with such cruelty. You can't do that. They're important business connections. They're parasites, Aries said firmly. And I should have seen it years ago. You know what opened my eyes? The way you treated the server who spilled wine on your dress Saturday night. You smiled at him, told him it was fine, that accidents happen. You showed more grace in that moment than they've shown in years of friendship. Michaela remembered the incident. The young server had been mortified, but she genuinely felt bad for him. It was just wine. It was kindness. Real kindness, the kind that comes naturally to you and doesn't exist in them. Aries took her hands in his. Michaela, I know Saturday night was painful. I know they hurt you with their words. But please don't let their cruelty convince you that what we have isn't real. What do we have? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Love, he said simply. I love you. I've been falling in love with you for 3 years, and Saturday night just made me realize I can't imagine my life without you in it. Michaela felt her heart stop. You love me. I love your laugh when you think no one is listening. I love the way you hum when you're concentrating. I love how you remember everyone's birthday and bring soup when someone's sick. I love your intelligence and your kindness and the way you make everyone around you feel valued. He squeezed her hands gently. I love you, Michaela Dorsey. Not my assistant, not someone I'm trying to change or improve. You, exactly as you are. Tears spilled down her cheeks as 3 years of suppressed feelings came rushing to the surface. I love you too, she whispered. I've loved you for so long that I forgot what it felt like not to love you. Aries cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. Then don't let them win. Don't let their ignorance steal our happiness. But the difference in our worlds. There is no difference in our worlds, Aries said firmly. There's just us. 2 people who love each other and want to build something beautiful together. Before Michaela could respond, he leaned forward and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and full of 3 years of unspoken longing. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying. I have something for you, Aries said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box, and Michaela's breath caught. Aries! It's not what you think, he said quickly, opening the box to reveal a pair of sapphire earrings that matched the midnight blue of her gala dress. I saw these and thought of Saturday night, of how beautiful you looked, how confident you were before they tried to tear you down. I want you to remember that woman, because she's who you really are. Michaela looked at the earrings, then at the man who had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. What about those job offers? Take the best one, Aries said without hesitation. Be the executive you're meant to be. I'll find another assistant. What if I want to stay here? What if I want to work with you as an equal instead of working for you? A slow smile spread across Aries's face. I think quantum dynamics could use a vice president of ethics and compliance. Someone who understands that technology should enhance people's lives, not exploit them. Is that a job offer, Mr. Chambers? It's a partnership offer, Ms. Dorsey. In business and in life, if you'll have me. Michaela looked into his eyes and saw their future reflected there. Not the fairy tale she'd imagined on Saturday night, but something better. Something real and earned and built on mutual respect and genuine love. "Yes," she said, standing up to meet his kiss. "Yes to all of it." As they held each other in the empty office, with the December sun streaming through the windows and the city of Los Angeles spreading out below them, Michaela realized that sometimes the wrong girl really was the right one. Not because she'd changed to fit someone else's world, but because someone had finally seen the worth that had been there all along. The fairy tale wasn't over. It was just beginning. Love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who sees your imperfections and chooses to love you anyway. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.